Welcome back to Untaming Masculinity, the podcast where we tackle issues relevant to men and their journeys to reclaim their masculinity. I'm Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, good friend Brad. What's going on, buddy?
Oh, just had to corral my kids this morning. You know, I think you always like to joke with me how why I'm always constantly 10 minutes late to everything. But
that is
doing all right.
That is your intro every week about corralling your kids.
I love my kids. They're the coolest kids in the world, but I gotta shepherd those kids into various places. How are you doing, man?
Pretty good, man. I have a quiet house because, unlike you, I have teenagers now, so they just sleep. That's all they do. But
someday.
I'm doing good. It was a rough week, but I'm getting through it, and we'll, it'll be better next week. So today, though, we are joined by an interesting character, Clint McInnes. He lives out in Utah with Brad, and he's a tattoo artist, amongst other things, a hunter, and we'll get into a little bit more. But welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. It's pretty great to be here. Pretty excited about it.
Cool. So why don't you just tell the guys a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, as he said, I live in Utah. I'm a tattoo artist. I've been a full-time tattoo artist for the last coming up on 7 years, and love every bit about that job, man. It's one of the best jobs ever for me, and I love sitting down and having conversations with people and figuring out kind of what they want for a tattoo and what they want out of a tattoo, and sometimes why they want that tattoo. So yeah, it's a really good job for me. I have a pretty decent sized family. I've got 3 kids, and my wife also has 3 kids. So yeah, we've got a big household, and it's kind of hectic some days, but we love it, and we're all over the place with sports and everything, school wise and everything in between. So yeah, that's basically me. I do hunt. That is something that I'm in the middle of seasons right now. So you guys caught me at a good time where I actually had a weekend open.
One of the biggest reasons we want to talk to you is because you're a really interesting guy. You've got diverse interests. You're just an interesting dude. And one of the questions I had was, you obviously didn't start out as a tattoo artist. That was something that happened in your late 20s, your early 30s. What did that transition look like? Like, what was that? Did you just wake up one day and say, I'm destined to do this? How did that shake out?
I wish that I could wake up and say I'm destined to do this on anything. No, that's not how it worked at all. I actually worked at a local copper mine. I was a maintenance guy out there, and worked my butt off, worked shift work, worked a ton every week. Like my low weeks were 48 hours. And when they would shut the mine down, we would work as many as 80 hours to 85 hours in a week. And so that place felt like my home more than my home felt like my home. So it took a lot of time away from my kids. And this was before I'm married to my wife, who I'm married to now. But it took a lot of time away from my kids. I remember times when I would pick up my kids and I would drop them off at my mom's house because I didn't know what else to do with them because I had to head to work. So I looked at that all the time, and I just thought, I don't want to be here. And it wasn't that it was a great job, but I don't want to be here in this spot in life where I'm missing my kids, and I'm missing birthdays, and I'm missing them learning how to ride a bike because I'm working. And yeah, as men, we have to provide for our families, but I hated missing it. And I didn't know what to do about it because they were paying me good enough. I couldn't go anywhere else. And so I know this sounds counterintuitive, but I got my first couple of tattoos around that time where I was not liking how much time I was putting in my job. And I looked at my second or third tattoo and this shows the arrogant side of me. I said to myself, I feel like I can do a better job than this. And that was because I had grown up doing art. So I went and found an apprenticeship And I worked my butt off for that guy for a little while. And a good friend of mine was working with me at the time, and he went to open his own shop. And so I went with him, and I learned a ton there. And it was a part-time job for me. When I didn't have my kids and I wasn't at work, I was at work. And that took away the rest of my free time, which was fine because I wasn't doing anything with it anyway besides sleeping. So added in that second job, and I worked my butt off, and I loved it. I loved sitting down with people. And at first, I just kind of thought of it as a hobby that kind of made me a little extra money. I didn't think, oh, this is going to be my forever job, and I'm going to do this from the get-go and any of that stuff. I thought to myself, like, yeah, it makes me a little bit extra money, so I've got a little bit of play around money during this time. And there was one Saturday where I went in and I worked the entire day because I didn't have to work at the mine. I worked the entire day, and I made as much as I made in a week at the mine in one day. And I thought, wait a minute, I can do this. I can make this a full-time job. I can make this my full-time job. So that was when it all clicked in my head. And I really started pushing towards that, knowing that if I did make it my full-time job, I could control my schedule. I could hang out with my kids on my weekends with them. And I could go to field trips and soccer games and all of that stuff way easier than if somebody else was controlling my schedule. So I started to push really hard in that direction of where I needed to head. But that also meant less time with my kids during that time. That was a sacrifice I was willing to make because I wanted to get to the point where if my son came up and said, Dad, I've got a soccer game on this day, I could move some stuff around, or I could schedule that off and I could be there. When somebody else is telling you your schedule, that's a real hard thing to do because your boss doesn't care about your kid's birthday. I don't care how good your boss is. They don't care about your kid's birthday, and they don't care about going to your kid's soccer game or any of that stuff. They may give you time off for that, but they really don't care about it. When you're your boss, when you are your boss, you do care about it, and you can make it a priority. So, I started working towards that, and it took me a lot longer than I thought it would to make that transition. But I wanted to get to a certain place before I quit because I had kids and stuff like that. But I wanted to get to a certain place financially. And one of those things was I wanted to buy a house because it's extremely hard to buy a house on self-employed numbers. So I did that, and I knew I'd be able to afford it. And I'm really glad that I did, especially with the way the market ended up here in Utah. So just had to do a couple of things like that. And that took me a few years. And man, there was hard times during that. When you're looking at a goal that's a few years out, there are days where you question whether or not you're getting any closer or not. And sometimes during those years, you're not getting any closer. But just keeping focused on it and keeping plugging away at it. I stayed on that path and eventually got to where I needed to go. And I thought everything was going to be all fine and dandy after that. And it got even harder after that. So, it was good. But yeah, I just wanted to be able to control my schedule and spend more time with my family and have a life that existed outside of work.
That's a powerful story. What kind of lessons did you learn going from, working for a company versus you started your own shop, right? I understand.
Now I have.
So yeah, now you have. So what have you learned in that transition about business and leadership and just kind of the mindset shift from working for somebody to working for yourself?
That I lack leadership skills because the only person I can pay attention to sometimes is me. That's why I work alone. When I first started tattooing, I was working in other people's shops. And that was because I didn't need to try and learn how to run an entire business at the same time. I just wanted to learn how to tattoo better. And that required being around other artists, and that required watching how they ran their businesses and paying attention to those things. So I really wasn't looking at like, how do I lead people and how do I wrangle these people in? I didn't pay attention to any of that stuff. I focused on how do I get better at what I need to get better at. And so it was a pretty, I don't want to say selfish thought, but it was a selfish thought of, I just need to concentrate on me. And I did that every chance that I could get. There was days where I would go and spend thousands of dollars going to seminars, and just stuff like that. I did everything that I could possibly do to learn about tattooing. I slept tattooing. I breathed it. Like, everything was about tattooing for me and art. And I just had this passion for learning about all of it. And it got to the point where I didn't really care who else was around me outside of my kids. Like, I had friends. Well, you never come hang out anymore, and you even run your own, you're your own boss right now, and you never come hang out. Well, I got more important places to go right now. And it literally was just about me getting better across the board. While I was in this weird transition period of having that quote unquote safety of a paycheck every week to, I don't know where my house payment's coming from this week. There's so much to it. I read every business book that I could to try and get better on the business side of things. I went and talked to every tattoo artist who wasn't a jerk and some of them that were jerks. But I just talked to a ton of people in that arena to try and create that for myself and to get where I needed to go. And honestly, that early, really hard work during that time, that was crucial. I wish that I could explain that to so many people, that if you literally will have to forget about everybody else in your life for a very short amount of time, probably a year or two, and then you're going to be okay. But you've got to push really hard for that 2 years, and then you're going to be fine in whatever you want to do. But that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Too many people want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to still be able to goof off, if you will. You have to be focused and you have to be disciplined. And I think that that's an incredibly valuable lesson in what it takes, not only in starting a business, but in life. If there's anything you want to excel at, it requires focused work. You can't, there are no half measures. You can't half-ass it ever. And I think about that, and I think about the work that you've put in, not just in, obviously with your tattoo shop, but all the other ventures you're in, right? One of the things you didn't mention is, you started Jiu Jitsu a few years ago. You're hunting. So I guess the question becomes, what lessons did you learn from that adventure of that pure focus that you use to extend to other elements of your life?
Well, anybody that's close to me will tell you that the minute I actually make the decision to dive into something, I become completely obsessed with it. There's no dipping the toe in. There's no I think I might do this. There is, all right, I'm in on this. When I got to the point where I felt comfortable in business enough to go out and add in a hobby like jiu-jitsu, I hit up Kip and I said, "Hey, where do you practice jiu-jitsu at?" And he told me where, and I said, "All right, I'm gonna come and make a few classes." Well, I had already committed to 3 months of classes. I'd moved my schedule around so that I could make 2 times a week for 3 months, and I hadn't even been in a class yet, and that was kind of weird to me. I just had this loose interest in it, and I'd never done anything like it. I had never in my life rolled around with a bunch of sweaty men. And so, yeah, that was a new venture to me. So I dedicated that 3 months, and it was funny because probably the first or second day in class, I thought to myself, no, I want to be here. I want to be here for a very long time. And so I looked ahead at my schedule and I said, how can I get 4 times a week? And how can I get 5 times a week? So I started moving my schedule to where I'm one of the very few tattoo artists that starts at 9 a.m. in the morning. When you tell people that they're getting tattooed at 9 a.m., they look at you a little funny. And I mean, it is what it is. It's because I want to go to jiu-jitsu in the middle of the day. So I moved my schedule around, and I don't really see a point in kind of dipping your toe into something. The only thing that's going to do is give you apprehension about actually completing it and doing anything good in it. And this is with hunting. This is with jiu-jitsu. This is with everything that I've looked at over the last 5 or 10 years of my life. There isn't really a dipping your toe in. If you're to just dip your toe in with hunting, you're probably going to go walk around the forest for a little bit. You're not going to take the time to figure out how to find animals. You're not going to figure out how to properly shoot your weapon and be proficient with it. And so you're not going to be successful. So why would you dip your toes in? And that's kind of across the board, right? Like if, excuse me, if I were to say, oh, I want to dip my toes into jiu-jitsu. Well, guess what? I'm probably going to get tapped out 1,000 times and see no success from it. So why wouldn't you go a little more and just dive into it? Like there's dipping your toes in is going to lead to apprehension, and it's going to lead to you just creating barriers for yourself. There's no reason to dip your toes in if you want to see success.
So I relate to that a lot because I'm one of those guys who's the same way, right? If I take on something new, whether it's hunting or snowboarding or mountain biking or something, I'm jumping right in. I'm getting the gear. I'm learning as much as I can. I'm balls out on it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this though. At some point, you accumulate all these things that you do, and you either run out of time to do them all, or you find that certain things don't serve you. So can you speak to maybe some examples of how you remove those things from your life when you've put so much into them?
Yeah, because I'm actually really good at that. So anymore, now I've changed my frame of thought on things. I'll have friends that come up and they introduce these things that they're doing, and they sound interesting to me, but I'm not willing to give any of my other time up. So now I'm at the point where I'm like, glass is full, can't take any more of this because I don't want to invest a whole lot of time into it. And it's not that I don't want to invest time into it. It's that I don't have any more time to invest. I'm going in too many different directions. My free time is filled up with these other things. And it's not that theirs doesn't sound interesting and what they're doing doesn't sound fun. It's that I really don't have the time for it. So I look at it like that now. If you were to talk to me 10 years ago in my transition period, if it sounded fun, I was going to go do it. I learned how to skydive during that time, and it was awesome. Jumped out of a bunch of planes. And after that, I thought, yeah, it's great, but I don't want to invest time into it. I really just want to focus on these other things. And I looked at it as a priority. If I can't invest the proper amount of time to be good at jiu-jitsu, then I don't want to do jiu-jitsu. If I can't invest the proper amount of time to be proficient at bow hunting, then I don't want to be a bow hunter, and so on and so forth. And sometimes that requires going out and spending a bunch of money to figure out that, oh crap, I don't have time for this. Because I'm in the same boat. Like if you tell me we're going to go do something, I'm going to go buy a new gun for whatever we're doing. Because that's what you do. You buy a new gun if you're going to get into jiu-jitsu, right?
Yes, always.
But you go and you spend all this money to make these things happen. And then you figure out oh man, this wasn't the path that I wanted to be on. Sometimes that takes figuring that out, but you're not going to know that if you're just barely I'm dinking around with it. And I'm not really giving it a full try anyway. It's hard to figure out what you really want to invest your time with. But I think if you look at it as a whole and you look at it as what kind of people am I going to be around? when I go and do this thing. When we go to Jiu Jitsu class, and Brad knows this because he goes to the same place I do, the people are amazing.
Yes. Factual.
And I'm not just saying like, oh, they're really friendly people. No, they run their own businesses. They're successful in the things that they do. They're healthy. They have positive mindsets, and they're very forward driving people. They're awesome to be around. Well, the same can be said with the guys who I hunt around. And so you look at like what you're putting yourself into, and is it something that's going to be good and push you forward? I look at that, and maybe you guys have friends. I don't have these friends, but maybe you guys have friends that are like, hey, let's go try some crack. They're probably not people I want to hang out with. So you look at their lives and how their lives are going from the outside. Obviously, you don't know them on the inside quite yet, but are they successful? Are they someone you want to be around? And are they going to make an influence on your life? Or are they going to make a good influence on your life? Because they are going to make an influence on your life.
Yeah, I think about that concept all the time. It's who you surround yourself with, the people that you choose to interact with. They make an incredible difference. As you were talking about your journey, really trying to dive into tattooing and what that entailed and giving up working at the mine, that probably was incredibly difficult. But at the same time, when you surround yourself with people who make you want to be better, those challenges, those hardships that come along in life become so much easier to bear because you're sharing a joint and common purpose, a common goal. They might not want the same things you do, but they're striving for more and they're striving for greater. And seeing them work makes you want to be that much better. I think about that concept all the time, man. And you're somebody I actually think about a lot with that concept. You've made the conscious decision to surround yourself with great men. And as a result, your trajectory has been an absolute rocket ship.
Yeah. And I don't know. I have a habit of sometimes seeing people that I want to be around and going and doing things because I want to be around those people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to do those things, but I also focus pretty hard on, I like the way that person's life is turning out, and I wonder what they're doing different than me. And so I'll go and do certain things to try and get a little closer to them, which ends up good in both ways. I do get closer to them, and sometimes I figure out that, hey, sometimes we're not supposed to be friends. But I also figure out maybe I do like this, and this is going in a good direction, and it does introduce me to better people along the path. I'm a huge believer in the people around us make up our life, and it's proven factual time and time again in my life, and it always will. So I look at the people around me as a very special thing. Everything from my kids, my wife, and her kids. I look at those things and I hold them very closely. And my friends, my close friends, I look at them in their life and I look up to them. And that's the same as my kids. I look at my kids, and I know not a lot of people think of it this way, but there's things in my kids that I look up to. There's something special in every single one of them. And I'm like, damn, like I wish that I could be more like you on that. And I need to be more like you on that. That's the same thing in my wife's shoes. Like I wish that I could be more like you in that. And how can I use your influence to better my life? And it's not that I'm using you. It's that you're helping me. And I think we kind of need to be there for each other. Even think about your life and somebody else's. They probably look up to you for a reason. Hopefully they do. And you need to help them be better at that.
Yeah, it's you just said you're not using them, and you're not. It's you're making that conscious decision to surround yourself with good people and people you aspire that have certain traits that you aspire to. It's that whole concept of, I forget how the exact saying goes, but your life is the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, or however that saying goes. But you're specifically picking people to spend time with that have attributes that you want. And it's not using them necessarily, but it's improving yourself by putting yourself in the right situations and not putting yourself in the bad situations, right? We've all got people in our lives who, and Brad and I have talked about this in the past, who they're I'll say they're good people, but they don't do anything to benefit you and improve your life. And sometimes they even drag you down. And while they feel like they're good people and you had a relationship with them, sometimes the hard decision is to actually remove those people from your life because it's a detractor as opposed to an improver.
Yeah. And I mean, you start to think about it in that sense. And this goes back to like the hobbies or what you want to invest your time in. It's the same kind of thing. You get to a certain point of, oh, I've got these good people over here and I don't want to invest any more time in anyone else. Or that one maybe isn't worth the time that I spend with them. And it's not that they're worthless as a human or something like that. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm saying sometimes they're not advancing your life enough to actually have that time with them. And that's okay.
Yeah, you have a goal of where you want to be going.
Yeah.
And those people are detracting from that. They're holding you back from getting to that goal. Whereas the other group of people may be pulling you towards it.
Yeah. And I think you need to be really conscious about the people that you have next to you in your life. You need to really look at how their life is, because the closer they are, the more influence they have. And you need to make a conscious choice of, do I want this person here? And you need to show them that you want them there and prove to them that you're worth being there too, just as much.
Yeah, we can always go into situations thinking, I want to surround myself with these types of men or these types of people. But we don't often ask ourselves the question, am I the type of man that people want to surround themselves with?
Yeah. And sometimes we need to adjust to be better on those notes across the board. If you need to be a better dad, sometimes you need to adjust to those things. And it's all right if you aren't or weren't as much or as good as what they needed, as long as you start working towards that. But that doesn't qualify that you get to stay in that person's life either, right? Like that only qualifies that you're moving in a better path than you were yesterday. And so you have to think about that and think about it in the same sense that you would think about your own life. If that person is serving you and if you're serving them, and you should be advancing your friends' lives. You should be advancing your wives' lives, and your kids, and you should be adding value in every life that you come to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a powerful concept, man. So speaking of adding value into people's lives and all this deep conversation talk, you have a very interesting job in that you get to spend sometimes 20 or 30 hours with people. Sometimes these could be strangers they might have been referrals while you're working on a large piece on them. It's a long time. And I'd imagine some of these conversations can get really deep. So I guess in your unique position as a tattoo artist, as much as anything, is a conversationalist in so many ways. What are some things you've learned in having these conversations with some of these people, some of these individuals that have come in to get a piece done?
Oh man, I've learned so much about myself, and how I react to certain things differently than other people. There's days where you go in and you have a 30-minute session and it's still a powerful conversation if you let it be. So I kind of make the conscious choice of going in every day and knowing like, yeah, I've got people to talk to. And sometimes it's me that needs to do the talking, and other times it's them that needs to do the talking. And I just need to sit there. But you hear everything. And because sometimes you do come in as a stranger, everyone just lets it go. You're a therapist. I had a dude in my, he was in my chair the other night, and he was literally crying, and not because of the pain, but because of the conversation that we were having. And it's not that this man would go around and just cry in public, right? But it's because we have these powerful conversations, and you allow that space to happen in that small room where it's just you two and maybe even a third if they brought a friend. But it's just a small, intimate setting where people can let that stuff go and they can ask questions and I can ask questions and you can dive deeper because nobody is doing that right now. You look around you and they're having a Facebook conversation. I mean, how many people put something on Facebook that they can Google? They ask a question on Facebook and they can Google and get the freaking answer, but they want to have a conversation. It's not that they're too dumb to figure out Google. It's that they want to have a damn conversation. So people want to have these conversations, but nobody's having them. They're going on these subsurface little things because they don't know what else to do. They don't know how to have them. And some in my studio, sometimes that takes a little bit of priming that pump because they don't know how to quite have those conversations. I'll tell you, I know how old people are just by how well they conversate. I know an under 25-year-old when they come in and get tattooed because they have no idea how to have an actual conversation. But I also know a lot of 25 to 35-year-olds that barely know how to have a conversation. But when you get them in there and you start diving deeper with these things, I ask people questions that they've never been asked in their entire life. And you're coming to me as an adult because I don't tattoo minors. You should have been asked a lot of these things and you should have thought about a lot of these things, but they don't. And they haven't been asked those things. So you just learn to dive deeper and to try and push a little more than that little level of like, oh, how are you doing lately? Oh, good. Well, that was a fun conversation. You push a little more, you figure out. And sometimes me pushing isn't saying, well, what's good about it? Sometimes me pushing is talking about some of the crap that I've been through in life. And some of it's just like this conversation here where they're like, how did you like start tattooing? How did you get into that stuff? And it's not because they want to learn how to tattoo. It's because they're struggling with where they're at in life.
It's really interesting to me because, like you guys mentioned, you're sitting there with a person in a very intimate setting, right? You're putting ink on their body that's going to stay there forever. And do you have situations where people just don't want to talk? They just want you to just, do the tattoo and walk away? Or is it always kind of almost for lack of a better word, like a therapy session for them to some level?
I would say probably 98% of it is a therapy session. There's a few sessions here and there, and it's usually on a really rough spot. There's spots on the body where people can't talk to you because they're concentrating on their soul leaving their body while I'm tattooing their knee. There are those times, and I totally understand those times, which is funny because I still try and talk to people through those times. But there's days where we know it's going to be a rough session and they'll bring in headphones and they just need to get in their Zen spot. But it is very few and far between. If you're coming to me for a tattoo, 9 times out of 10, it's because you know that I'm going to talk to you.
That's wild.
I had a tattoo artist that I worked with for a little while, and he didn't mean it in the way that I took it, but he told me one day, he said, people don't come to you for your tattoos. People come to you because you're you. And he meant it in a negative way. I took it in a positive way because that's what I do in life. But he just was pointing out that people like coming in and talking with people and joking and having a conversation and sometimes getting deep in those things. There's a lot of tattoo artists who come in and they put on headphones. They don't talk to their clients, and that's fine for what they want to do. But I want to do it differently because I don't believe that we're having enough deep conversation in life.
Yeah, there's this concept of there's so many people who have things simmering just beneath the surface, and we don't always know it, but sometimes they just need an avenue to be able to express that. And for you to be able to be there and help them facilitate that is a really powerful thing. And that's something Dan and I talked about last week, is just checking in with your guys, making sure that they're doing okay. You can tell when something's not right with somebody. And when you're in that intimate setting with somebody, even if you don't know them, after you've talked to them for a few minutes, you could probably pick up on the fact that something's there. We need to have those conversations. There's so many people who go through things and they think they're going through things alone, which is why we were seeing this influx of mental health issues and all this other crap. And it comes down to the fact that not enough people are having conversations. Just like you said, we're not talking.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that we as people tend to think that when we're going through something, we're the only person in the world that has ever gone through that particular thing. And maybe what you're going through is rare, and not everybody has been through that. But I guarantee there's people out there that are still willing to listen because they've been somewhat close to it and they've had an interaction with it. But you have to take the time to actually like figure that out, because you're going to sit here and you're going to think that you're alone in all of life. And the minute that you open your mouth, somebody will tell you, hey, I may not have been through the exact same thing, but I'm willing to listen to whatever you've got. And
That's huge, though, too.
Sometimes you get people that you think you're the only person that's ever been through something. The minute you open your mouth, somebody's like, oh my gosh, I've been struggling with the same thing. I thought I was the only person, but it takes opening your mouth.
That listening part that you just talked about is huge. So with society today, there's very much like a me first mentality, and the ability to just not relate the conversation to yourself is a skill set that I think a lot of people are losing, honestly. And you know, what you're talking about is allowing people to talk and to get whatever's ailing them off their chest and out and talk about the situation without relating it back to a specific situation that you had. If you experience the same thing, you can share it, but just being there to listen to them and to help them work through it without saying, oh yeah, I had something like that happen too. And then all of a sudden the conversation steers back to you. That doesn't help the person.
Yeah.
Being there just to play their emotions off them and absorb it and listen is huge. And it's something that doesn't exist as much in society anymore, I don't think.
I'll be honest, I actually struggle with that one a lot because I want to relate to people. And so when someone tells me something that I can relate to, I'm always like, let me spew all this stuff on you too. And it's not that I'm trying to take that away. It's because I want to tell them, hey, I know what you're going through and I'm here to listen to it. And I think that there's two different ways of going about that. Yeah, you can obviously say like, oh, let me tell you my story about that and blah, 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 and go through that. Or you can say, oh my gosh, I've kind of been through something similar. Let's hear like how you reacted to it, and go from there. But I do struggle with that one. And I'm learning how to stifle that a little bit to the point where I'll have that thought of like, oh my gosh, I've been through this exact same thing. I should totally bring it up. And then I have to tell myself like, chill out, just let them talk. And, that I think that's a skill that you do need to work on, because I think that naturally we want to relate to people.
We want to relate to them, but also by sometimes we rob them of that moment.
Yeah,
I'm guilty of this too. I was, as you guys were talking about this, it's bouncing around my head how often I do the same thing. It's with good intentions, but we really have to be self-aware enough to just take a step back. It's okay if we don't share our experience. They need this more than we do.
Yeah.
All right, fellas. Thanks for listening. Make sure you come back next week. In the meantime, check us out on untamingmasculinity.com. You'll find the show notes for this and all of our other episodes. You'll also find links to Clint anywhere you can reach him on the internet. And we ask that you leave us a rating and review in your podcast player. And until next week, we'll leave you with just one question. What are you doing to untame your masculinity?